as you mentioned, we're talking about the shifting landscape of performance testing. The way I want to address this subject is in two parts. First, we'll talk a bit about the theory. So what is load testing? Obviously, the history of load testing, and then I will do a quick demo to illustrate what I mean by that, by all this. But first of all, I mean, you probably already know, and this is a definition. It basically comes from Wikipedia, but I think it helps to, lay the subject here. Because load testing and performance testing is a process of putting demand on a software system. That everyone can agree on that. But the important part is the second part of the definition, where we also need to keep in mind it's about measuring the performance. It may seem obvious, but this is one of the key aspects of load testing that is often overlooked. Anyway, moving on from the quick definition, the way I like to get started is to talk a bit about the history of load testing, where it started, how it evolved around the years, and where we are right now. Because I think it helps understand the new tools we can see, new open source tool we can see coming and going. They also helps understand the trends in the load testing market. And one of the very first tool that was created was LoadRunner. If you've already done load testing, you probably heard about it. It was created around 1993. There were one version earlier, I think, but yeah, that's the idea. So quite a while ago, more than 40 years. And it was a code-based tool. Like you had an IDE in which you would enter code like this, where you would just enter an address you want to test, do something, and etc., etc. And this kind of tool became very popular in the 90s. Other tools were created on the same basis. Although LoadRunner remained the most used one, they were all on the same premise that you would code a user journey through an application using this kind of thing. These tools became very expensive over time, and also one of the big problems is they are very complex to operate, because creating a user journey through code like this, entering all the parameters, it can lead to huge code or large code base that you have to maintain for the test. So slowly over time, the things switched to, and it started in around 98 when JMeter was introduced. And at first, JMeter was a very, very simple tool. You can enter one URL and you can test with up to 10 users, and that's it. Nothing else. Over the next years, it became more and more complex while still remaining a very simple tool. So you have a few screenshots here of the first version of JMeter, and you see even 1.4, it's about running 20 users. So it's not like you would run a huge test with it. But it slowly became more and more complex, up to the point where these tools, even through having a UI that would help you design things instead of having code, as you can see on this screenshot, it became also very complex. So it made it very hard to use, but it also made it very hard for new tools to appear, because if you wanted to compete with JMeter, you had to do all of these things you see on the screen. So it's a lot of work for a new tool to put on and to figure out before you can address or before you can have momentum. And in the open source community, momentum is very important. Several other paid tools were developed around this time in 2005. There are a lot, but you could quote a few like Neoload and a few others. These tools were also based on UI and were doing pretty much the same thing than JMeter. So I would say it's the second generation of tools where we are moving away from code and using interfaces to make it simpler for testers. It's still possible to code inside these tools, but it's like an added feature, not the core of it. That's a key difference. Moving on a bit more, around the 2010s, and 2012 is the first mention I found about Gatling, but there have been a few other tools around that time that went back to code-based, because code-based testing was being helpful again, because it made it simpler to develop the tool. You don't have to go to develop a UI. You just provide a library where people can code their thing, and there you go. So it's interesting to see that the shift this time is not because it's better for the users, it's because users are looking for simpler tools. They don't care about the UI and they can just go for a simple test using a simple piece of code. So it's interesting to see this new tendency appear around that time. Of course, they went against JMeter, and they are still competing against JMeter, but I think the use case is very different for both, and they can all coexist peacefully. And to come to the end of this introduction, the last period of time I would mention is around 2016. That's also around the same time that you start hearing about Postman. Postman is a very popular tool for operating API testing, so testing the functional testing of APIs. But there are others as well. You could quote Katalon as well, and you have a lot of new tools that also want to provide new UIs that you can use to quickly generate a lot of tests and manage them easily. That's also when we started at Octoper, so that's why I'm getting there. And it's a different approach. So for some of these tools, it's a different approach. For instance, regarding what I said earlier, where new code-based tools, they were created in order to avoid having to deal with UI. What we did, and what a lot of tools did, is use a different approach, is to use the existing open source tools that already are there, already are powerful, but don't have a proper UI, and you just create a UI on top of it. So you become the paid version of these tools, and you provide the same value than them, and even more, because you can work on nicer features and nicer integration. So that's what I want to demonstrate real quick. I'll do a short demo of how it works in Octoperf. If you've never heard of any of those tools, it's not a problem. What I'm going to be showing is self-sufficient, so you can just follow along. So first of all, I'm going to log in, and I like to create a new project in which we will be working today. Simple project. Let's call it demo. Doesn't matter. And I like to do a record of a user script that will replay against an application. We have a number of options, but I will go for the HAR option because this one allows me to record from my browser and import that. So the way this goes is I can open my Firefox and use it to record what an application is doing. We have a lot of other options, but that's the one I want to go for today. So I have a Firefox right there. There we go. What I'll do is use the DevTools in my Firefox. I've just activated this option. Otherwise, it's a vanilla Firefox with a standard DevTools. So, you can do that from a fresh installation or from your existing Firefox. And now if I navigate through an application, I can see the recording right there. If I go through a few pages, I can say it's kept in there, and we can work on it. Already at this stage, it's a lot easier than open source because we don't have to install anything on our computer. We can just go with our standard browser, use that to do the recording. And at the end of the day, when we have finished recording the use case on our application, and let me go to the confirmation page. There we go. Confirm our order right there. I can just save that as an HAR file and import it in Octoperf. So it's almost 6 p.m. where I am in France. So I'm just going to show you it's the same one we are going to import. There we go. Let's upload the HAR. So there we go. Almost 6 p.m. Doing that will create a virtual user for us, and we can do everything we want with this virtual user directly from our browser right there. Typically, we have every request that has been recorded. We can reorganize it, can make it easier to read, rename all the different steps. I have a pre-home page, I have my home page, etc. We can also work from this and reorganize by adding, for instance, a new group of requests. Can create a container, and I can shift click to move some of these requests inside this new container, and etc. etc. The point of all of this is we can design an entire script in this UI and work on it. One way to work on it is to handle whatever is going on at the login stage, because the login stage in performance can be a challenge. Typically, if you're doing a functional test scenario, it's okay to use one login. But if you're doing a load test scenario, you probably don't want to run thousands of users using only one login. So opening my login request, and I located it using the login and password I used. Actually, the login, but yeah, both are the same. We can see here it's using this value. So what I can do now is create a variable where I will import a list of login and passwords. There's a few other things I can do, but let's focus on the list of login and passwords. I will upload a file I already have created where I have a list of values. This file, we can see its content here. We have a few login and passwords. Some of them are incorrect, but it will just spice things up for the reporting. But there's no header in this file, so I will manually enter the header right there. There we go. So I've imported a list of login and passwords. I can go back to the login from earlier. I had it right there. And now what I can do is say, okay, I'm going to use variables I have in my file. We will provide a unique value to every user during the test based on the content of the file. And using these variables, we'll make sure they are replaced every time a user runs. He will use a different line from the file. So in my case, the file was rather short, but if you need to run a long test, you can provide a huge list of values, and they will be used in a unique manner. Now let's have a look at what is this, how this works before we continue. I will run a couple of iterations here. The point of running these 3 iterations is to, since at this stage I'm testing with a single user, because I just want to do a smoke test or a unit test before we move on to the real one. I just don't want it to run only once. I want it to run a few times. So we will analyze this. Octoperf is running the user in the background. It's actually a real test with a single user. Next, we will do a real test with a couple of them. And you see, the good thing is we are already taking care of the infrastructure in the background. So that's also one of the key things of having a UI like this. We will be able also to analyze what's going on. Typically, this request, we can see 2 out of 3. It's a login request, if you remember. So now we can analyze what's going on. We can see what we sent. We sent different values for cookies. We sent a different login and password as expected. And we have a different response code in the headers. We can see we have, you remember I ran 3 validations. So if I check the number 3, I can see, okay, this one's different. That's why I have a problem right there. And I can open it in a new tab. And doing that, I can see here, okay, yes, problem with the login and password. So yeah, as expected, this one has and we can check in the request body. You see we are using user 3 and the password we're using user, which is incorrect. So what I'll do is just add a custom control on this response. I just don't want to ever have this error message. So I'll just call it a login OK real quick. And then for this one, I'm going to say, okay, I want a negative control. I do not want to have this inside the response. Now again, having a UI, I can check that it works. Now number 3, I see it fails, but on all the others, I can see it working just fine. So, that's a very good, that's the advantage of being able to do that. Moving on to the runtime, I will be able to model the load I want to generate. And if we check the default runtime, we go from 0 to 10 users, but clicking here allows me to do whatever I want. I mean, I can, add some custom points, and not that I've made anything, not that what I've made makes any sense, but we can transform it back into a preset. Could go for 50 users. That's a good amount for a demo, I think. And with some ramp up and down. So now we have a load policy with a ramp up and down. We are running it from Paris, but I could run another one from another region. You see, I can duplicate. And the second one, I can run it from further away. I could say, okay, why not California right there? This way we'll have 2 very different locations in the world, and we'll be able to compare them. Now we can see we have Paris and North California now. Now I can launch this test that I've visually designed, and it will get me to the result. And if you remember what I said when I started with the definition of load testing, One of the key aspects that's missing in all the open source testing solutions is this, what I'm going to show in a few minutes, is you will not have a very simple result interface that you can manipulate. So that's an important step also here to look at, because it will be how we find out the value of our test. This is where, sorry, we will find the value of our test. This is just got started, so we'll have to wait a few minutes to see where is all these metrics coming to us. But I don't expect to be waiting there too long. It's the main point of this report is that it's live, yes, but it's also configurable. That's what makes it interesting. Because a lot of open source tools, they will give you an HTML, some of them only after the test. Here, you have, during the test, the possibility to edit and control the load you're generating and see the results of it. Like I have the user count, number of users running, number of requests running per second, and average response time, but I can click to edit, and I have this interface where I can place filters, select a different metric, can do a lot of things here. To keep it simple, I will only highlight the filter on region. This way I can create a filter on both regions and compare them. Now I can see them right there, but I can also close this screen and see them on this one. Where, okay, I have Paris, which is a lot faster than the other one because my application, the one I'm testing, is actually in Paris. And another great another advantage is we will be able to also check the structure of the user we have been running. So this is the user we've created. We can see the error rate. We can see various metrics here, also shown as a tree, making it easier to understand at which step we have a failure. Of course, I didn't rename all the steps correctly, so it would be easier if I had taken the time, but you can imagine in a real situation that you would rename all of them correctly. Here I can see that this one is having a lot of errors. The other one as well, by the way, but it's just on an icon, on this icon, so 100% here is not such a big deal. The account detection one is a bit worrying though. And if we check out the errors, we'll see that, yeah, this one, it's account detection here. It's the one for the login. So yeah, that's why we have this issue. We can inspect what's going on, and there we can see the login and password we use, a response from a server. So, all of this is very helpful to have instead of having to dive through logs and everything. We can have a look at it in real time while the test is running and understand what's going on. Well, obviously what's going on is I didn't fix my login and password file. I just caught the issue, that's all. So that's what's going on here. And at the end of the day, everything we design in there can also be exported back. So that what makes it interesting is that we can, if I stop it anytime, I can generate the same kind of report, share it with other people so that they can, have a look at it, have a look at this report. You can enhance it by adding your analysis. If you want to write things, you can use a block of text here, add your own custom generated content in there, and share it with your colleagues. Well, that's a quick overview of what I meant with AI versus code base. You see the unique is UI versus code base. When I use a UI based tool, it allows me to very quickly design a scenario that goes through an application, run it, and have a meaningful amount of result. Even though I've been working on this for 15 minutes, a bit less than that, even though. Whereas the tools being code-based can be useful when you have very simple use case, you want to test one functionality or something like that, but they can quickly add up in terms of maintenance and the amount of work required if you need to do complex scenarios or end-to-end testing. Anyway, that's pretty much the idea. I try to keep it simple so that we have time for questions. So let me know if there's anything.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. So, just a quick reminder, we have the Q&A panel open. So if you have any questions that you want Guillaume to address about what you just saw on his presentation. In the meantime, also by all means, you can see the resources on the screen. If you want to see the documentation, if you want to try the product, check out their blogs or tutorials. Please feel free to go to any one of those links. We're going to go ahead and place those links in the chat window, so you also have access to them. And but let me see. I'm trying to look at the Q&A. Guillaume, I don't see anything right now, or in the chat. Crystal, thank you so much for the compliment. Looks like the demo was pretty cool. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and launch the poll for this presentation. Your feedback is extremely valuable, so please let us know how did you like it. Feel free to share anything you want to also share in the chat window. All right, so while we roll this poll here, I want to remind everyone that we are going to continue on the sessions today. We have, after after what we saw here in code versus clicks, the shifting landscape of performance testing, we're going to talk about embedding mocking into your Katalon test suites to solve dependency headaches. And also Sergio is going to tell us about the holy grail of testing. And Sergio is going to tell us if we have found that yet. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Ben about testing AI-driven systems and machine learning pipelines, following by some closing remarks that I'm preparing for you. So, all right, so I think we're done with this poll right here. And then, Guillaume, I don't know if this question is for you or in general for the panel, but there's something that came through the chat that says, any suggestion on penetration testing or security testing? Is this something that you can address?
I know a few things because I have a few friends in this area. It's actually rather similar to load testing, but not exactly the same thing. So, no, I don't have.
Okay.
I don't think I would have good advice. That's my point.
I'm sure you have good advice, but yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. And then let me see. So we have there's a question that came in the Q&A. It says, what is your expected benefit from AI for load testing? Is anything that you can share with us?
That is a good question. To put it short, I haven't seen anything relevant so far. It's difficult because AI needs a lot of data. AI can code quite good because they've been trained on the entire open source code available on the internet. Basically Microsoft use GitHub to do that. But on load testing, there is no data set publicly available for load testing. So you can have AI help with monitoring, because for monitoring, you can train them to monitor your systems and they can tell you where you have a problem. This would be relevant to load testing. But for load testing itself, there is no data set where you could say, okay, you need to do this to test this kind of application. It depends on the functional, it depends on a lot of things. So as I said in the panel earlier, I don't know if you were here, but I think AI is useful around testing, because it can help before, it can help prepare the requirement, it can help you with some problem solving afterward, or to create the reporting. And it can help you to create a data set you're going to use against your application, create relevant data set with some variability. And it can also help to create test environments. So all these things, but the process of load testing itself is so atypical that we do not have an AI that can really help with that yet.